Hello, everyone. Eric Hörst here. It's Monday, August 16th, 2021. Post-Olympic, the first post-Olympic training cafe. In the previous edition, a couple of weeks ago, I kind of gave you my thoughts heading into the Olympics, which I was really psyched about. As an older climber, there's been talk of climbing eventually appearing in the Olympics. I mean, 30 years ago, when the World Cup circuit started, there was speculation about it happening. And of course, it didn't for decade after decade after decade. But here in 2021, 1 year delayed from when it was supposed to be, we finally had climbing debut in the Olympics. And yes, it was a flawed format. And the outcome was really up in the air, especially for the men up until the very last minute because of this weird scoring system. And I'll give you my thoughts on all of that in just a bit. But I think it was a great show, for the world to view climbing and see, some of the excitement and drama, and most important, the characters, the personalities. They're quite diverse, from the speed climbing. The Martin brothers were incredible. Too bad Bassa suffered that injury, or the medal outcome could have been quite different. And the ladies, of course, dominated by Janja once again, but, the young guns appearing. And really, I looked at this Olympic as kind of a passing of the torch in a way. Some of the veteran climbers appearing, like Jan Hoyer and Shona Kaksi and Noguchi, people that are aging out of competition climbing. They kind of hung on for this first Olympics. But I think for most of them, it's done. And then the new climbers, the 18-year-old from Spain, Alberto, who won gold, which I wasn't expecting. But, hey, on any given day, especially with a funky scoring system, it was, a nail-biter to see how that was going to all play out. And Colin Duffy, though he didn't make the finals, is a great young climber. And then there's the tweeners, the 20-something climbers like Nathaniel Coleman or Nanaka, there's a herd of them there in their 20s. Even Megos and Andra, their upper 20s. It'll be interesting to see if they hang on for the next Olympics in Paris in 2024, or whether they've had enough and want to get down to the real business of climbing, which for them is climbing really hard routes. I'm speaking of Megos and Andra, who are the only two climbers to do 515D, and perhaps one of them in another 5 years might do the first 16A, though it could easily be one of the younger climbers, who's still in their teens that does that 5 or maybe 10 years from now. We shall see. There's a long way to go to consolidate 15C and D and get to 16A. That's a whole nother discussion we can have sometime. But, let me give you some of my thoughts on the Olympics. But before we do that, let's not forget, this is Training Cafe. Got my Café craft mug here from Germany, and we shall sip together. We commune with coffee because we love climbing. We love talking about training for climbing, and that's what the cafe is all about. So let's sip together. Climbers around the world unite. Climbing brings people together, as I'm fond of saying. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the Olympics, and then I'll get to some of your questions. I think I like to keep this episode to 30 or 40 minutes if I can. I can get talking and run on and for an hour or more, but I'd like to keep this one focused, and I got a busy day here ahead of me, so I want to try to keep this one tight as I can. So in any case, the Olympics, first of all, I need to talk about the TV coverage. Now, depending what country you're viewing from and what feed you saw, you might not relate to what I'm going to say, but the live feed in English, me being in the Eastern United States, I got up at 4 a.m., 4 mornings in a row to watch the live feed, which wasn't on regular television here in the United States. I had to tune into the NBC, Olympic channel or the NBC Olympics app to view it live. But the English feed was disappointing, especially the first couple of days. The camera shots are terrible. The director going from one shot to another, it was just terrible. They should have just hired the camera folks and the director from the IFSC to do this, and it would have been a lot better because they have been terrific in their production, getting better and better year over year. They high on that learning curve. But I am not slamming any individual, but it was just a poor presentation. That did get a little better towards the end, but even in the finals, there would be these close-ups of a handhold when you wanted to see the wide shot and know where the climber was on the route. And while the close-ups are nice at times, especially to give non-climbers a sense of what the climbers are grabbing, when you get to the drama of the upper part of a route, let's say, you need to have more of those wider shots to know what's going on. And the commentary in the English feed was not very good either. Now, I'm not speaking about Meagan Martin and the NBC primetime broadcast, where they packaged bits and pieces of the climbing and ran it on regular TV with Meagan Martin. She's awesome. She did a fine job. I'm talking about the English feed that was live. And I'm not sure exactly who the commentators were, but if I hear that guy say lactic acid gathering in the forearms one more time, I'm going to lose my mind, because science has shown that lactic acid doesn't even occur in the body, at a biological pH. You have the lactate and the hydrogen ions, and the lactate's actually a good thing. It's a metabolic byproduct that can be used by the oxidative system. And the hydrogen ions, they're the bad thing that you need to buffer and circulate out and train to be able to deal with. But that's a whole nother subject as well. It just is like 20, 30, 40-year-old science when you hear people talking about lactic acid. It's just, shows ignorance. And so that was kind of my little pet peeve, but the commentary was not all that good. Again, if they would have had Meagan Martin on the live feed, it would have been a lot better. Hopefully, if you're viewing from a foreign country, you had a better feed, but perhaps not. Maybe somebody can tell me, in Europe, were you getting the live feed with the English commentary that I'm speaking of? I'd be kind of curious to know. On to the format. And we all knew that this format was bogus. I was at an international conference back in 2018 in Chamonix that I spoke at, and the IOC liaison was there to explain the format and why it was going to be this way, where they would take the three disciplines: speed, bouldering, and sport, and then they would multiply your final ranking in each to get the gold medal winner. And basically, it was either take that offer from the IOC or climbing won't be in the Olympics. That's kind of, in a nutshell, the negotiation that had been going on for years. The Olympic Committee only wanted speed climbing because it's the 100-yard dash on a climbing wall, essentially. And it's impressive. The speed climbing is really amazing. To see the very best in the world do that while so fast. But it's not a representation, obviously, of real world climbing, what you and I do at the climbing gym or at the crags or at the boulders. It's a contrived competition that's been around for a long time. I guess speed climbing came out of Russia 30 plus years ago. And so I'm not advocating that we eliminate speed climbing as a format, but it should have stood on its own. And the Olympic Committee wanted it to be on its own as the only climbing discipline in the Olympics. But IFSC negotiated that, no, we were going to do bouldering and lead also, or not do it either. And so they came to the conclusion, okay, well, we'll give you all three events. You could do all three disciplines, but you only get one gold medal. So you have to figure out a way to divvy it up. And again, the way it should have been is have all three disciplines get their own set of medals, so that the best speed climbers in the world would be rewarded, and the best boulders and the best lead climbers also be rewarded. And then we would see if some folks could win two medals, like Janja, for instance. but that wasn't meant to be, but it does sound like it's going to be the future. The Olympics in 2024 in France, from what I understand, they've agreed to give individual medals. So this scoring system, this combined scoring system, is done. And so for climbers like Adam Ondra and Alex Megos, who have been very vocal about not, really wanting to train for speed, but having to, they have run their last speed race, I would assume, because they can now just train what they're good at, which is bouldering and lead climbing. And I'm happy that the speed specialists will be able to compete with the best in the world, because there were some other great speed climbers from Iran and elsewhere that were squeezed out. It was a numbers game, and didn't have a chance to win a medal. And so that is kind of in the rearview mirror now, this combined format. And, we will be seeing a very different Olympics in 3 more years in France. It did make that scoring system, the combined scoring system, did make for very interesting viewing, exciting, down to the wire climbing on the lead wall the last day for the men and women, especially the men. At one point when Jakob was climbing, if he would have fallen mid-route, Adam Ondra wins gold. And then he climbs, 6 or 8 moves higher, and Adam Ondra is out of the medals. So that, to me, shows how lame the scoring is, that just a little change in one climber's outcome would have resulted in this big move from gold medal to no medal. That being said, and I love Adam Ondra, I think, he's incredible on a number of fronts, and he's quite a character and personality in our sport. I mean, if he would have won gold, it would have been kind of pretty unfair, right? Because of what played out in the speed, where Basa Malam tore his bicep and therefore couldn't compete in the finals, and Adam Ondra was paired up against him in speed. Surely Adam would have lost and been out and had an 8th place finish. And so if Basa doesn't get injured, it would have been hard for Ondra to get a medal unless he got 1st or 2nd in both lead and bouldering. And with the performance he had, it wasn't going to happen. But again, with Basa out, Adam is automatically through the first round and guaranteed, what did he end up? 4th, I guess, in speed without having to climb. And so, that, as it turned out, could have helped him get gold by way of an injury of another athlete. And so, yeah, the scoring was just terrible, but it did make for a very exciting finish with, every move a climber made, changing the medal, especially Jakob. And I forget who climbed last for the ladies. Was it Jessie Pills? I think climbed last for the ladies. Same thing. As she was climbing, the medals were moving around. And so as terrible as the format and the scoring system was, it did make for exciting viewing. If you could understand the scoring, which, to someone who follows it closely, I understood exactly what was going on, and I'm running the numbers in my head faster than the TV commentators running the numbers. But if somebody was a non-climber trying to follow the scoring system, it wasn't at all intuitive. Not like gymnastics scoring is or running times are. That is for sure. In terms of individual performances, Ondra had an off, competition, I guess you might say. He was never expected to do great in speed. I guess he, by virtue of Basa's injury, did better at speed than he had thought. And he did, I think, run his fastest time or climb his fastest time ever. So that was a good, period at the end of the sentence for his end of the book on his speed climbing career. I think he climbed his best time on his last climb at speed. But he just didn't look comfortable climbing. Alex Megos didn't look comfortable, looked tight to me. And, Alex is, you know, incredible. But he's always been, kind of only half in on this competition thing. For sure. He's an outdoor climber first and foremost. And so he wanted to represent his country. And he's done really good in some World Cups, especially in lead climbing, that I think if I was him, I would have wanted to be there. So he got this Olympic experience, as did Andra. But for neither of them, you might on paper say, oh, well, they got to be favored because they're so awesome outdoors. But that's just not how competition climbing is. It's about who has this track record and experience base. Every time you do a World Cup, you're putting a deposit in a bank. So if you're Jakob Schubert, you've put a lot of deposits in the bank and have tremendous experience. And, as do, some of the other climbers who do as much time competing as they do outdoor climbing. Janja does way more competing than she does, infrequently outdoor climbing, obviously. And, and it showed. Janja is untouchable and really, the GOAT. You might say at this point, her dominance internationally the last few years in competitions has been remarkable. And, it's a beautiful thing to watch, though. I also, as an outdoor climber and performance coach, it's fun for me to, speculate. You take that skill set and then apply it outside. What could Janja do? And I'm sure, 15B would happen, in a season or two when she shifts her focus outdoors. And perhaps could be the first person to climb 15C. That would not shock me. But, that's a story that's yet to be written. And it's going to be very interesting to see what she does, what approach she takes the next couple of years. Does she do more outdoor climbing, with a 3-year break until the next Olympics? Or does she remain really focused on the World Cup circuit? So we shall see. U.S. climbers pretty much played out, I guess, as you might expect. Nathaniel Coleman's been climbing great and competing well the last few years. And so it was great to see him win a silver medal. Brooke Rabbitou, I feel terrible for because she was peaking the last, 6 to 12 months, everything coming together to perform well at the Olympics. And unfortunately, just, I guess, a little bit of a heel pop maybe on the final lead route, and she didn't have the pocket strong enough to be able to stick it in that situation. And if she does that move, I think she goes high enough to medal for sure. And so that's really sad after such a great, appearance in World Cups the last few months. But I think she'll be back for sure. I can't see her. She's only 20. Or maybe 21. Can't see her calling it quits on competition climbing. And I'd love to see Brooke back in 3 years and win the medal then. Natalia Grossman wasn't on the Olympic team. That brings up another topic is, some sports, because of the 1-year delay of the Olympics, reseeded or requalified their athletes. Climbing, of course, did not. So based on the last 6 months of World Cup competitions, Natalia Grossman, you would say, should have been on the Olympic team. But, of course, she wasn't really competing internationally just yet when the qualifiers went down a year and a half or 2 years ago. I lose track. It's been so far back, pre-COVID, right? So Natalia wasn't there, but it would have been great if she would have been. Kyra's a super strong climber, certainly deserved to be there, but didn't climb her best. She sometimes seems to not climb up to her ability. Perhaps it's somewhat mental. I think I've seen her in some World Cup comps, even in person with my own eyes, where maybe she looks a little tired. She's a training fanatic, and so it's very easy for these pro athletes to try to cram training and not taper appropriately. And So I wonder with her and a few others, that sometimes don't look as crisp as they should, whether they're heading into the competition not quite 100% and ready to go. And so, I think Kyra is certainly capable of winning an Olympic medal, you know, uh, especially in bouldering. But it wasn't going to happen this time. She, like some of the other climbers, looked off for whatever reason. And, it's a stressful, being the first Olympic climbers, they have a daunting task that's not been ever before experienced by anybody. So there's nobody to talk to ask, how is this going to play out, to kind of get some sage advice from an Olympian ahead of you. They were the first. And then all the COVID restrictions, I don't know what impact that had on their ability to warm up and train once they arrived in Japan. But yeah, it was an adventure for sure. And so I think everybody just should feel proud that they were an Olympian, regardless of how well they climbed and regardless of the outcome. And then Colin Duffy, just 16 or maybe just turned 17 years old, the young climber from Colorado. We have not seen the last of him. He's been someone who's been shooting up both in height and in competition ability the last year or two. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the Olympic team, or at least competing and on some podiums internationally in the next couple of years. Same thing with the other countries. There's the young Korean girl, and I think there's perhaps in Japan going to be a passing of the torch now. And so I think we're going to see a lot of new people appearing. Laura Rigora did not perform well at the Olympics. A lot of people, just because she's climbed so hard outside, assumed she would do great at the Olympics and win a medal. But, that obviously wasn't the case this year, because neither Andra or Megos, the two best male climbers in the world, and Julia Chenardet, who's climbed 515B, wasn't really in the mix for a medal either, despite being a fantastic outdoor climber. And so it kind of is what it is. And I really appreciated it for the athletic show and for the drama, in that last round, waiting to see how it would all end up with this crazy scoring system. But it'll be great just to see a more conventional competition in 3 years with medals in each discipline, and each climber being able to have an opportunity to win at their best discipline, whether it's speed or bouldering or lead. So overall, thumbs up for climbing in the Olympics. I'm happy it's there. I know not all climbers of my generation are happy that it's there. They feel it's a bastardization of rock climbing, or it's a commercialization of rock climbing. But I take the other approach. I mean, I love climbing, and I know how climbing has impacted my life and changed my life and made my life so much better and richer. And I'm sure you can relate to that too. We all get something a little different out of climbing, but what we all can agree on is it has life-changing potential. So why not share that with the world and get more climbers, more people becoming climbers, or at least trying the sport, even if it's only in a climbing gym, even if it's just to try out a speed wall because they saw it on TV. They don't all have to become outdoor climbers, though that is my passion. I think you can just be an indoor climber in a city with no mountains or crags nearby and still enjoy climbing and experience the physical and mental benefits, and the way it just makes you feel better about yourself and make life better in some way. So in any case, there's my wrap up. I see some comments being typed in regarding the Olympics, and it's, from what I'm seeing here, I see some agreement on my comments. So, okay, let's get on to just a few training questions. I want to go through this quickly and try to wrap things up here in the next 10 minutes or so. And so, question here: following a crisp max strength climbing session, how much climbing afterwards just for fun without significantly taxing any energy system can you do without interfering in adaptations? If you have a really punchy, crisp max strength session, talking about weighted hangs, maybe some limit bouldering, maybe some campusing, which is power, but it should be matched up with max strength. I wouldn't do anything exhaustive, which you're not implying here. If you just do some for fun climbing that's submaximal, that is mainly the oxidative system and not taxing the oxidative system, then it could be almost considered a cool down, which wouldn't be a bad thing. But that being said, I think it's best to be focused in your training. If you've studied or heard my energy system training concept of breaking up workouts by energy systems, I think it's better just to split off that max strength and power workout and do everything that relates to that alactic energy system first and foremost, and then do your route climbing or your really lactic bouldering and leading as on separate sessions. And they could be separate sessions in the same day. I'm a big advocate of advanced climbers doing 2-a-day training, because you have to do a lot of training if you're an advanced or elite climber. Just 3 sessions a week at the gym is good for a beginner, perhaps even an intermediate. But if you're really advanced, you need 8-10 sessions in a gym or outdoor climbing combined in a gym in a week, which means you need to do some 2-a-day training, where you might do a strength power session in the morning and then 6, 8, 10 hours later do an anaerobic lactic session, or some other combination of that. The 2-a-day training is definitely the most effective way for elite climbers to get in high volume, the volume that they need, without doing these massive long, if you're going to the gym for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours and training everything under the sun, you're creating a lot of fatigue, but I'm not sure how many beneficial adaptations you're generating and getting out of that super long kind of shotgun session. Okay, next question. Thoughts on pulleys that have a minor ache from sleeping? Pain scale 1 out of 10. So very minor ache. When you're laying in bed and not up moving around, you can have some swelling, edema, fluid, your blood flow and lymph, and just you're not up and around moving, and so I guess it's not likely a big deal. If the pain persists throughout the day, if the pain gets worse during training or climbing, then it might be something you need to be thinking about. But if you wake up and go about your day and your fingers feel fine in what you're doing, then it's probably kind of benign, just like waking up with a stiff elbow, or you slept on your arm wrong and your wrist hurts or whatnot. But certainly if the pain increases or gets worse when you're training, then it's something you need to consider what is going on and take countermeasures. Should I do max hangs before or after a climbing session? Well, that's a big depends, because it depends on a myriad of things. I get questions like this a lot about, that really speak to exercise prescription, and there is no one correct answer. If somebody's absolutely telling you, you got to do your weighted hangs early in the session or late in the session or middle of the session, that's not a good answer, because it depends on the session. What does the session involve? And really who you are. I just spoke a minute or two ago about doing 2-a-day training. And so if you're a 2-a-day trainer, and let's say you're doing a max strength and power session in the morning, you're not going to do any climbing. You're going to do a warm-up, a very slow, gradual warm-up that'll be less than body weight activity, then body weight activity, and then eventually max hangs at greater than body weight. And that's going to ramp up over the course of 60 minutes. You'll knock out your hangs and your campusing at the end of the session, because the session prior to that is warming up. And so the end of the session is when you're fully warmed up and turned on, and you're doing your max hangs and you're doing some campusing, and then your session's over. And then later in the day, you do a second session, which might be bouldering or, lead climbing, whatever the program design is. And so, that speaks to the importance, especially for more advanced climbers, of having good exercise prescription, scheduling out your climbing and your training so that there's an effective, method to the madness there. A beginner can go to the gym and climb and dabble in a few exercises, and they're going to improve because they're still learning skills and getting enough training stimulus from being on the wall. But if you're more advanced, then you need very targeted training, and you need a very well prescribed program by a coach that really knows what they're doing, not somebody on Instagram just spraying out rules of training, like do hangboard first in your session, not last, or whatnot. It depends on who you are, your training history, what your overall program is. And so I can't give a crisp answer to that. If you're someone who's doing the typical 2 to 3 hour gym session, you're probably doing hangboarding in the middle of your session. You're doing kind of that warm up, that gradual warm up. Maybe you're doing a little bit of limit bouldering to get fully turned on and to try to do a few hard boulders. And then kind of mid-session, you could go do your max hangs before you're too fatigued, and maybe do some campusing, and then go back and finish off the session with a few more boulders that might be somewhat submaximal because you're becoming more fatigued. And so in that scenario, probably do the hangboard training when you're at your most warmed up and most turned on. If you're doing max hangs, you want to do them when you can do the most weight. And that's not at the end of a session, that's for sure. That's not at the end of a 3 hour fatiguing session. But if you're just doing a morning session that's an hour and 15 minutes long, well, then you're not even going to be turned on and fully recruited until an hour in. So you really are doing the hangs at the end of the session, though the whole session was just about getting warmed up and doing the hangs. The one thing I think everybody agrees on is you don't do that type of stuff at the end of a fatiguing workout. Doing anything limit in a fatigued state, whether it's limit bouldering in a fatigued state, going up on your route in a highly fatigued state when you have no chance of red pointing it, bad things happen. And so, doing a lot of hangboard training at the end of a session, like max hangs at the end of the session, I would not advocate. Again, there's probably some exceptions to that, like a beginner or beginner/intermediate who's climbing at the gym for 2 hours and then wants to dabble in some hangboarding. I often will say, hey, do a few sets of repeaters at the end of the session to kind of get some targeted stimulus of the different grip positions. Because if you're climbing in the gym for an hour or two, every hold you're grabbing is a different grip position. So you're creating fatigue and you're getting pumped, but you're not really hitting a specific grip repeatedly, which is what it takes to kind of get stronger in those different grip positions. So for that beginner intermediate, climbing for an hour or two, and then going and doing a few sets of targeted repeaters, like half crimp, 3-finger drag, maybe going through the 2-finger pocket teams, doing a set of repeaters of each of those grips at the end of not a super long session, but at the end of a 1 or 2 hour climbing session is probably okay. So you can see, I just ran through all these scenarios. There is no one correct answer to that. Okay, reflecting back here, Mario, on the Olympics, the gold really depended on where Jakob was falling at the very end. That, was just incredible. And Jakob, that was, talk about a clutch performance there at the end. Greg, in the past, you valued sending routes within a session or two rather than projecting for days. Approximately how many more letter grades could a doable project be over, I guess if you project for many days versus just that 1 or 2 day MO. And yes, that's me personally. I'm not saying that's the right thing for you, and certainly for pro climbers who have to project hard routes for days and weeks, months perhaps. But for me, kind of most of my life being a weekend warrior, I get out to the crag and I want to climb some routes. I want to clip some chains, not spend a month or 10 climbing days parked under one route. And so you're going to not climb as hard number-wise. Using myself as an example, if I project a route for a day or two, I'm kind of a 513 AB climber. Last year I did a 13C and it took me 4 or 5 days. Maybe 8 goes over 4 days, I guess is what it was. How many more days and goes would it take to go to 13D for me? Well, I think as a first guess, you double the number of days. So if it took me 4 days to do 13C, maybe if I found the right 13D and put 8 days in, I could do it. And maybe you could speculate that if I found the right 14A and put 16 days in, I could do it. So that doubling rule is a rough guesstimate, but it could be a tripling rule. And you can't just go forever, upward in that way. But again, you might, whatever grade you can climb at, say, 4 goes, maybe you can climb the next grade, or in 4 days, let's say. Maybe you can climb the next grade and double the number of days. Maybe it's triple. No hard and fast rules. And of course, there's always, when it comes to routes, like there's low-hanging fruit routes, and that are easy for the grade, and then there's harder routes that are hard for the grade, or at least maybe for your body size or situation. So yeah, there's no crisp rules there, that's for sure. That's something about climbing. Last couple of questions, there's a lot of, it depends. There aren't a lot of crisp rules, which is why it is hard just to take bits of advice from, the internet or a video, or even one of my books, taking those bits of advice and trying to apply them like they're the golden rule doesn't work. And it leads many climbers astray to do the wrong things, because climbing training is so complex that it does, an effective program needs to be highly personalized, especially the more advanced you become. Yeah, Carlos says, hey, it's a start. The Olympics he's speaking to. It's good, good show for the first go. Nothing's perfect, that's for sure. Okay, finger health question. How worried should I be by minor A2 pulley pain, tender to the touch? Feel completely fine when warmed up, but I'm a bit apprehensive about strength training. Yeah, I've been in the same boat as you. I have had this little pulley tweak in my A2 of my middle finger that actually started in the spring. And when I was climbing outdoors in the spring, it got a little worse. And then I had my summer trip that I didn't want to obviously cancel. So I, for a few weeks wore a pulley splint to kind of give it some extra support and protection. I dialed back training and climbing. And I felt generally the pain to the touch, which maybe at its worst was a 3 out of 10. I thought it'd come back to like maybe a 2 out of 10. So that's a good sign, but it's still not all clear. And even if you're feeling any pain to the touch, like right now, I have no pain crimping on it. I did a climbing workout this morning in my home gym, and I had no pain while climbing, but I still have some pain to the touch. So indicative of there's still some inflammation, there's still some anomalies there in the collagen tissues, and you still have to take a cautious kind of rehab protective mindset. Warm up well. If I'm doing anything near maximal, I would tape it tightly, which is debatable whether that has any value other than awareness. But I feel like perhaps the way I tape with local tape provides a little bit of protection. Now, when I do hangboard train now, I do not do any half crimp with the PIP joint at 90 degrees and the DIP joint hyperextended. That's what's the hardest on that A2 pulley. So I can hangboard train with weight in an open hand grip and not have any pain and not feel like the tenderness increases. And so you need to proceed cautiously. Often pain to the touch is the beginning and the end of, an injury. And so when you start to feel pain to the touch without pain climbing, you might be inclined to say, well, I'm just going to go for it and climb hard. But that is when it can get worse, and it can become a partial tear that really does become painful to climb and then lays you up significantly. As you come out of a A2 pulley partial tear where you did have to quit climbing or dial things back or do rehab for a few weeks or a month or two, where it did affect your climbing and make you hold back a little bit, as was kind of the case for me this summer. As you're coming out of that, you don't have pain climbing anymore. That's a good sign, but you still have pain to the touch. So that's still like, okay, be cautious. I'm making improvement. Like for me, I'm thinking about my fall climbing season. I want to get this healed so I can really go for it. So yeah, pain to the touch is a caution sign, not a stop sign if there's no pain while climbing. Okay, hey, good morning back to you. Just a few more questions I need to get going here. Oh, I asked about the live commentary, how it was abroad. Mario says English commentary was terrible. So listen to the Italian that wasn't as bad. Okay, so there's one answer. And Marky, yes, fully agree. I think we all agree we need a medal for each discipline, and that sounds like it is the future. So that's good. That's a good question, Scott. I was speculating that maybe people like Andra and Megos have done their last speed climb. But he's wondering, like in gymnastics, would they still want to do all the disciplines with a chance of winning the overall medal? And I think for some climbers, yes, absolutely. Like, the Japanese, like Tomoa, who I thought was actually a favorite for this Olympic, and he didn't end up faring so well. I think someone like Tomoa for sure. I think, Brooke Rabatu, the younger climbers, Colin Duffy, who have grown up doing the speed climbing, may still do it. But I think the older climbers, probably not, although they're going to mostly age out here in the next Olympics. So maybe in the future, there will be still a lot of people going for a combined medal. If they give a combined medal, I'm not 100% sure that is guaranteed. Like in gymnastics, you can win a medal in an individual event, and then there's a combined medal as well. Adam and Alex, the best in the world when it comes to male climbers. And then, you look at the females who have climbed 15B, and you could maybe say the same thing about them. So it is a shame, but this format was not destined to reward who we view as the best rock climbers. With the scoring system, it was the best sport climber. And on, at this Olympics, it was Alberto, according to this system, and it was Janja. Okay. Hello from Denver. Hey, Vinny. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, that is a good question. Janja is on the national team, so does she have a choice? Yeah, I mean, they don't have to do every event. They can duck out of any given World Cup event. But if she's representing her country on the team, I would imagine she'll do most of the World Cups. Though she could duck out of a few, like many climbers do. But, oftentimes, they don't want to fly to China to the event there, or maybe if they are fatigued or just need a break, they take off one of the European stops. Okay, Steve says lead rounds looked incredibly hard. Boulder problems were complex. Short turnaround times, all in a day, including speed. Yeah, I heard some commentators making a big deal about the short turnaround times, and just an hour, or maybe if they were lucky, hour and a half or two between having to do speed and boulder and lead routes. I kind of like it because it's athletics, and these are highly trained athletes, and so I didn't have a problem with them doing all the events kind of back to back. Yes, it's hard to stay warmed up and ready for that long, what, a 6 hour period, let's say. But again, these are elite athletes that their job is training and going to the gym and climbing and, spending, 6 hours staying warmed up and trying to stay on top of things to climb their best. I think it was actually an interesting test to do that. And it was a good order because you had the most powerful event first, and then the bouldering, which is power endurance, and then you had the lead climbing, which is more aerobic / lactic endurance. And so in that order, I think it worked out great. I mean, if you swap the order and went lead, bouldering, speed, it might not be quite as good of a thing. But I thought it was pretty interesting. You mentioned about the problems. I didn't talk about that, but yeah, the men's final boulders were a disaster. There was very little there to create separation. I think there should absolutely be 4 boulders, of differing style, rather than just one problem basically creating the separation. There should be 2 or 3 problems that create the separation. I thought the lead routes were great. They did look super hard. To see the climbers up there struggling just above midway. Basically the routes precipitated everybody off as they should have been, except I guess for Janja or Jakob. And so, yeah, I had no issues with the lead routes. Great job for the route setters there, but the boulders, not so good. Way too hard, I thought, overall. Yeah, Scott says best female climber didn't compete this year. Natalia, at least in the World Cups this year, was the best. I mean, there's a group. I mean, Kyra, Brooke, and Natalia are all super strong climbers, and so it would have been great to see all 3 of them there. Shauna's been injured, and Kyra has also had, I believe, maybe a few injuries. Perhaps that have affected her. Jessica Pills. I was at the World Cup in Salt Lake City in May. She tore an A2 pulley in May and somehow rehabbed it and was at the Olympics at the beginning of August climbing her best on that lead route. You saw she had her finger taped, but so quite a comeback. That's what, if you really jump on these injuries, I'm sure she would have been wearing a pulley splint for the first few weeks to a month or month and a half after that pulley tear in Salt Lake City. I would like to know more about that, how she came back so quickly. But I was, she's a great climber. I saw her win a World Cup lead in Chamonix a few years ago. Great climber, beautiful to watch. And it was awesome that she was able to compete in the Olympics and do so well. Slovenia, is awesome. Their coach does a great job, especially the girl climbers, but, the men's team has been strong as well. Yeah, and that's good point here, Steve. The 1 versus 1 versus an actual speeds, final is kind of weird as well. Imagine if they did the 100-yard dash this way, where they kept pairing up people. Kind of odd, but that goes back to how speed climbing and its origins, coming out of Russia or wherever, pairing them up. That's kind of the history of the sport. And you can't set up a track with, 10 lanes of a speed wall. So I guess we really have no choice. Though I guess you could award the medal to the fastest time run overall, but it's a contrived activity, no doubt about it. What is your prediction, Eric, for how the Crags are looking 4 or 5 years from now, post-Olympic? V12 is already the new V10. Can really go much further. Hopefully people focus more on development. Yeah, I mean, I remember 20 years ago, people saying, when they started building all these climbing gyms, the Crags were going to get super crowded. And yes, the Crags are getting more crowded, no doubt about it. Go to the Red River Gorge, 1,000 climbers on a nice weekend, or you go to Red Rocks and there's 1,000 crash pads walking around the desert in the winter. And I'm sure in Europe there's places like that as well. But the statistics show that, vast majority of people that learn to climb indoors, something like 80% of them just are indoor climbers. So they're not 100% venturing outdoors. Certainly the numbers are going to grow outdoors, and the impacts on the environment will grow, and the limestone routes will get more polished. So yes, there is going to be continued growing pains. In terms of the grades escalating, V12 being the new V10, that's part of better training and indoor climbing. And I think system walls, and such have really helped. If you're between 16 and 36, strong, young male and female climbers in that age range, if you can stay healthy and train smart, you're probably going to be able to boulder V double digit. The tools are there to get there, and certainly the inspiration is there to do it. Still, you need to have the right program, and you still need to do more things right than wrong when it comes to training and diet and becoming a better climber. You just can't hangboard your way to V12. Just like you can't you can't just outdoor climb your way to 514. I think you do need to do some indoor climbing and some other types of training. There's a pretty complex puzzle to be solved to climb harder. Looks like Rocklands has space and no queues. Yeah. If we could all fly to South Africa, maybe that would change. But it's one of my bucket list places, and I've never been there. So hopefully one day we shall see. Okay, so I've gone 50 minutes, so I guess it's time to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for tuning in for this training cafe with coffee, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks. And not sure what the topic will be, but if you have some ideas, you can shoot me a note out. You can always leave me an Instagram message. Eric_Hörst is kind of my personal Instagram, and then the training for climbing is kind of my more training Instagram, and then PhysiVantage is my nutrition company Instagram. And so you can find me at any one of those locations, or on Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I'm not on those things all the time. It's not productive, but I check in on them every day or two. So if you have a question or comment, shoot me a note out. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe, be strong, climb on.